So you've been daydreaming about standing on top of mountains, swimming in turquoise lakes, hiking some of the world's best trails, and sliding down snow-covered slopes. But stop dreaming. This could be you.
Hey guys, Simon here from Wild, and this is How to Move to Canada. I've been living in Canada on and off for about 5 years in total now. And to be honest, the level of adventure that is possible here in the mountains or in the country is pretty hard to beat. So in this video, I'm going to go through the process of how to apply for a working holiday visa, as well as sharing invaluable resources and going through a few hints and tips of where to base yourself and how to find work and accommodation once you get to the country. So stay tuned. The route most people take when it comes to visas is applying for an International Experience Canada Working Holiday Visa, also known as an IEC visa. This visa gives you the opportunity to travel and work in Canada for up to 2 years, depending on your nationality. I'll be talking about this visa from the perspective of a British person like myself, as well as Australians. Before you apply, there are a few basic requirements that you'll need to meet. The first one being age. As a Brit, I had to be between the ages of 18 and 30 to apply. But as an Australian or a Kiwi, you have until you're 35 to apply for the visa. The second is passport. You need a valid in-date passport for your home country. And also I'd recommend having that passport have several years left on it. The IEC visa won't get granted for longer than your passport is valid for. So make sure you have a good few years left on that so you don't have to mess around mid-application. To be invited to apply for an IEC visa, you'll need to enter into the pool. For some countries, there are a limited amount of invites per year. For example, the UK only gets 5,000 invites a year. However, Australia is lucky, and you guys receive unlimited invites. So if you go into the pool, you're pretty much guaranteed to receive an invite. To create your profile, you'll need to answer a few basic questions and submit your profile into the Canadian government website. I've left a few links of how to get started on that in the description below. Once you receive your invite, you'll have 10 days to accept that invitation. And then 20 days after the day you accept the invite is the deadline for submission for your visa application. Because of this, it is sometimes useful to apply for some documents before you even enter the pool. Using police checks as an example. These can be issued up to 6 months before the date you submit for your IEC visa. So you can get these in advance and have them waiting and ready. You can decline an invite if you don't feel like you're ready and be re-entered into the pool. However, if you're from a country with a limited quantity of invites, I wouldn't recommend doing that. You've been lucky to be invited in the first place, so I'd try and be ready. However, if you're from Australia and you have unlimited invites, if you decline and get entered back into the pool, the chances are you're going to be invited to apply pretty quickly again. So you've been invited to apply. First, you'll need to fill out a series of questions. Be sure to be accurate. You'll also need to give a work and travel history. You'll need to gather together a series of documentation, some of which will be submitted with your application, and some you'll need to take with you when you travel to Canada. There will be an online checklist that you can follow, but as mentioned before, some of these documents are useful to have prepared ahead of time. Now, this is probably one of the easier ones. You'll need to have proof of 2,500 Canadian dollars when you travel into Canada, as well as proof of either an outward plane ticket or the financial means to buy one. So if you're flying into Canada on a one-way ticket, make sure you have at least 3,500 Canadian dollars in your bank and can prove it. Proof can simply be a printed bank statement dated within 1 week of your departure to Canada. So good news, the chances are you won't have to do this one. If you're from Australia or the UK, you won't need to do a medical exam to enter Canada, unless you want to work in childcare or healthcare, or if you've travelled to certain countries within the last 6 months. Now, you don't have to have this to submit your application, but you do need to have insurance for the duration of your trip for when you arrive into Canada. And it has to include repatriation. That bit is really important. Your visa will only be issued for the same period that your insurance is valid for. So even though you'll probably be eligible for provincial healthcare once you've settled in Canada and won't need to use your health insurance, I would highly recommend getting the full 2 years. I've known multiple people that have tried to save a bit of money and only purchase 6 months to a year's worth of insurance, and then they've been issued shorter working holiday visas. And there is nothing worse than having to leave a country that you've fallen in love with just because you tried to save a few $100. Providers will change really depending on what country you're from. If you're a Brit or you're from Europe, I'd really recommend looking into True Traveller. And if you're Australian, I'd recommend taking a look into the insurance provider called Fast Cover. I left links in the description below to both of those. You'll need to get a police check for every country you've spent more than 6 months in since you turned 18. Now this often seems overwhelming, but it is a bit quicker and simpler than you think to get hold of them. And the Canadian government website has a great tool you can use to find out the process for each country. And I've left a link for that in the description below again. If you can't get these in time, you can apply for an extension. You'll just need to upload a proof of the receipt of your application of the certificates that you need. Now this is an easy one. You'll just need to upload an up-to-date resume at the time of application. You'll also need to upload a copy of your passport with your application. As mentioned before, it is really worthwhile making sure it has a good few years left on it. You'll also need to upload a digital photo, and that does need to adhere to some pretty strict guidelines in regards to the size, the dimensions, and the pixels. You must complete and upload the family information form that I've linked below. A top tip for you, when you click that link, it's probably not going to open properly. So download it and then open it. Once all your documentation is uploaded, you'll need to pay the fee. The IEC fee, as of 2023, is 161 Canadian dollars. You'll also need to pay a working holiday permit holder fee, which is $100. Over the last few years, an extra step has been added into the IEC application process in the form of biometrics, essentially fingerprinting. And unfortunately, this is probably one of the trickiest things to get. Once you have submitted your application and paid your fees, you'll receive a biometrics instruction letter informing you where and how to get your biometrics done. If you're British, the only real location you can get this done is in London. And if you're Australian, you've got the options of Sydney, Melbourne and Perth. So unfortunately, it is going to require quite a bit of travel for most people. And this needs to be completed within 30 days. Again, I've left a link below to show you where you can get these done. Now it's just a bit of a waiting game. As of the time of filming, there was a 4-week waiting period, and that's after you've submitted your biometrics. And I know all of this seems pretty overwhelming, but trust me, it is worth it. I mean, look at some of these views. And to be honest, this isn't even the best bit. Hooray! You have finally been approved. And you should have received your port of entry letter, or your POE. Now, keep that safe. On its own, it doesn't grant you entry into Canada. So you'll also need to take all that supporting documentation with you when you fly. You'll need your port of entry letter, your proof of insurance, your proof of finance, as well as a valid passport on the day you land into Canada. And that port of entry letter only lasts for a year, so make sure you arrive in Canada before it expires. Now, there are also loads of great resources online to help you through this process, and I've linked a lot of those below. The first is the Canadian government website, and it does offer step-by-step instructions of how to do the application. Another great resource is movingtocanada.com. There's lots of different information on lots of different types of visas, and they also run a great Facebook group called the IEC Working Holiday Forum. And I really recommend checking that out. On there you can get some first-hand accounts of other people doing the process and just ask loads of different questions and get lots of great answers. From the endless prairies and cities to towering mountains and rugged coastline, there isn't really a bad spot to be in Canada if you ask me. However, my recommendation if you're looking more for adventure is maybe to look more towards BC and Alberta. Cities like Vancouver in BC or Calgary in Alberta offer that city living while still being close to the mountains. Vancouver also has some great coastline, but does tend to have a higher cost of living. If you're looking more for a ski bum lifestyle, in Alberta I'd recommend looking at Banff or Canmore, so you're close to those ski hills. Or in BC, look at Whistler, Silver Star, Big White. There are loads of different options if you want to be living on or close to a ski hill. Finding a job in a new country can often feel really daunting, and understandably so. But if you're flexible in what you want to do for work and the hours you can work, you'll find it soon enough. If you're lucky, you might be able to find employment before you arrive into the country. In fact, a lot of those ski hills do actually employ from abroad, and they'll often throw in staff accommodation as part of the deal. Actually, in a lot of mountain towns, a lot of employers will offer staff accommodation if you work for them. So that can be really useful and then kills two birds with one stone. However, in my opinion, it is actually much easier to get work with feet on Canadian soil. I was actually a hiring manager in Banff in Alberta for quite some time, and 95% of the people that I employed walked into the business with a resume in hand and were ready to work the next day. Ski towns will have waves of employment at the start of the ski season, so get to town a few weeks early, get yourself settled into a hostel where you'll meet people, and then get handing out some resumes. As mentioned before, a lot of businesses in tourist or mountain towns do offer staff accommodation. But if you're looking for your own private rental, just be prepared to pay a little bit extra if you're in a tourist hotspot. Or you may have to share with several housemates, but this is a great way to get to know people. There are lots of great resources on how to rent or where to rent. A website called RentFaster is a fantastic option, or Facebook Marketplace. Or a lot of towns have their own local Facebook page where people share rentals. Either way, it won't be long until you're settled into your new life here in Canada. Once you've got your job, your accommodation and your visa, the adventures can begin.